he didn't put down fornication. He didn't put down just having sex with anybody. He put down, in this particular case, adultery, which then I think that there's some aspects of it that have to do with this act of sex, but I think a lot of it is much, much deeper in terms of why he chose this particular thing in this lineup of things. One, to show us, you know, kind of, if you take the kind of opposite of each one, what is the higher calling, but also say, you know what, if you want to decide whether you are sinful or not, you know, and like in Romans it says, you look at this, and this will kind of tell you, are you on the right track or not? Are you doing the right things or not? And these are kind of the things that come to the surface after a journey of getting there. So these are not things like murder does not happen in an instant. Not murder. Now you might be able to have self-defense. Somebody comes after you with a knife, you fight with them and they're dead, and you go, oh my gosh, what happened there? It didn't happen in an instant. Murder is usually planned and there's events that lead to it. It's not an instantaneous thing. And so when you say thou shalt not murder, it's really communicating something that started far earlier than that act of murder itself. And the same thing with honoring your parents is something that started before, long before it takes time for you to get to the place where you can say, I honor them. It's really a progression that leads to, finally I'm at the place where I do something that is honoring, but that took a journey to get there. So let's look at some of the things. So there's three things that I wanted to kind of cover here, and it's difficult to cover. Each one of these is like an old 20-minute or hour lecture, or, you know, look at or examine. I want to kind of look at this as being a higher calling, adultery in general. That means what does it mean to us specifically as adultery to us, and then what does it mean in being adulterous to God? Because that's a very big aspect of this. Two is, in fact, if I was actually looking up and searching, did you know there's no adult? At least in the King James version of the Bible, adult, the word adult does not occur. When we come to God, we don't come to God as adults, we come to God as children. I don't know if anybody on earth ever got past the teenage stage. I don't know if there ever were any true adults on earth in terms of being at that level with God, at that level of maturity. You know, we're not there, but there is this idea of adultery. So I just looked that up and said, was there any adults there? Anyway, so I had said that there was three kinds of relationships, and so we're going to focus on this third kind that I felt that was in some of the commands of honor your father, do not murder, and then do not commit adultery. I think there's kind of an overlying thing of idea of living in a family or culture, and how do we deal with our family and culture, and those that influence us there, how do we work in that? How do we work in the kingdom, nation, or civil law where there's penalties to it? Of murder is something that is not usually handled by a family. Murder is handled by a community, handled by the nation as a whole. And then there's the idea of we're part of things, and then we have this particular thing called a covenant or commitment that we all enter into at various points in our life, of which the strongest that we'll ever come into on this world with one other person is that covenant of marriage. And so that's the strongest of the covenants that we have with each other. We've also got, if you're a believer, you've made a covenant with God. But it applies to you specifically. It's an agreement you made or is forced on you. A covenant is something it is for you particular, and you're under this. For example, if you're a slave, you're under a covenant. You didn't choose it, but you're still there, and you still have to do the things that master does, and you're in a relationship there that you didn't do. In fact, there are many marriages that were made outside of the person even wanting it. They were forced into it. Their parents agreed on it, and they became married. Does that make it any less than a marriage if you married for love? No. It's a covenant that may have been forced on you, or may be a covenant that you chose. But it is an agreement, and once that covenant is made, especially with this idea of marriage, it is a permanent thing for the rest of your life until you die. That's what it's meant to be. For the rest of your life until you die. Now things happen, and we're in a sinful world, and things occur where things go all wrong and awry, and now we're not where we should have been, and then God then deals with it there, and what's the next right step? But that is a covenant or agreement. There's no other agreement we have that lasts the rest of our life. No other agreement that we make. If you make, there are agreements, and we'll get to those too. But some agreements or covenants are short-term, like military service. You're typically there for a set amount of time, and then you leave that place. So it is not an agreement typically for life. Though some people make it a life, that is typically not one. Or a job, typically there might be somebody that lived the rest of their life at one job. In general, it's a short-term agreement or covenant you make with that company. And when you make that agreement with that company, you're responsible to certain things that you're not responsible to anybody else on this planet to at that time. You owe them a certain allegiance. You owe them a certain amount if you're part of that covenant. That agreement you've made. In fact, you signed on to it. I will work here. And under that, they have these things that they expect that you do. And if you don't do them, well, then you could potentially leave that job. But there's certain things you can't leave. And actually, the covenant with God, if you've made that, if you've become a believer, that covenant is actually forever. It doesn't stop. It goes on forever. And that covenant can't leave you, and that's the hard thing. Not necessarily, I mean, it's a good thing, but it's also a hard thing. People don't necessarily take into account. You know, this is for the rest of my eternity. This relationship with God. So the higher calling is, how do we honor our commitments faithfully, whatever they are? Specifically in this thing, we're also talking about specifically the commitment in marriage. Do we know how to prioritize our commitments? Do we know how to put God first, our marriage and our wife second, our children third, and we should then have maybe personal family, a spiritual family, others. How do we prioritize things, our job? How do we prioritize all those commitments we have? Many times we have, the priorities we take are cares of this world, selfishness, job, others, family. Down the line comes wife, and then you have things I don't like. I mean, really, a lot of times our wives come way down the end. We think, well, you know, we're married, I did enough. And so we're going to try to talk a little bit of that as I go along. It's not enough to go there. And do we understand that commitments entails, what a commitment entails? And for example, it entails work. Commitments at job. If you said, I'm committed to you to be your employee, and you just sat there and did nothing, they would go, you're fired. There's no commitment here. You didn't do anything. There was nothing done. A commitment was that you were supposed to perform these tasks. In marriages, there are actually tasks to perform that we do not do. Many times it's trying to seek and learn. When I told, you know, sometimes I kind of jokingly say the first 25 years of my marriage, I consider the honeymoon phase. That's where I'm still learning what she likes and she doesn't like. She knows more about me, actually, than I know about her still. You know, that's the way women are. They tend to ferret out more. But I've been learning that whole time, and I finally get to the place, I think after 25 years, and I'm now, this year's my 30th, I'm at the place where I'm just starting to get into the real marriage. Where now I've learned enough about what kind of not to do a little bit, and now I'm starting to get to the place where I really need to focus and cement it together and make sure my foundations are good. But it takes planning and applying. Okay, marriage is a covenant. It's a contract. It's one of the strongest that we make in our lifetime. One of the questions we'll talk about that in Genesis 2:22-25. It says that you become one flesh. What other agreement do you have that you become the same, that as if your flesh is the same? What other agreement do you enter into that you do that? Do you do that with a job? Do you do that with any other person? No, that's why it's a very strong commitment. It's a very strong commitment. Now, it's one of those things that we need to do what we can to preserve it. There's things that we can do, but it's one of the strongest, except for the commitment with that's even stronger still. And so, every language has a word for breaking a marriage vows. Actually, I was expecting a lot of Hebrew words for adultery. There's actually only one. And most languages have only one word for adultery. It's their word for adultery. It is actually in every language a single word because it's throughout the world, and it's something they say, you know, this is not a good thing. You shouldn't be unfaithful to your spouse. But I like the other word for it. It's unfaithful. You know what that gets past? It gets past the final act that just really overemphasized your unfaithfulness, which was the adultery act itself, the sex with the other person. It really started as unfaithfulness that it resulted in, eventually, that act at the end. So when we have this thing in the Ten Commandments, it's really referring to an end result of a long action that led to it. Unfaithfulness, oh my gosh, that expresses it so much better. Some definitions: adultery, voluntary sexual intercourse between a married man and some other one than his wife, or a married woman and some other than her husband. If I went to an unmarried woman and I had sex with her, we're both adulterers. Because I had sex with her, she had sex with me, doesn't matter voluntary or not voluntary. I then committed something that then we both now have broken a covenant. That person helped me break a covenant, so they become part of that, also that process. So that's also, they also talks about act or adultery. Fornication is basically having consensual sexual intercourse between two persons married or not. If you actually commit adultery, you're also committing fornication. If as soon as it wasn't a rape case or something, it's consensual, then you've done also fornication. So fornication, just having sex in general with somebody other than somebody in general, and then adultery specifically, if you now have a spouse, that adds on top of it. You're actually doing kind of two whammies all at once. And then I just want to mention lasciviousness because of the idea of it being a public behavior. That's being lewd, lustful. We use crude, filthy, foul, indecent, obscene, profane. Sometimes the NIV wants to use debauchery. I don't know if that's any better than lasciviousness in terms of, like, how many times do I use debauchery? I don't even know what it means. And I don't know lasciviousness. I mean, unless you look it up. But the idea that this is public behavior, most adultery is public or private. What do you guys say? It's usually something you hide. Though there are some people that are proud of cheating on their wife and make it very wide and open. Usually people do it in secret. Especially Christians like to tend to do it more in secret because they actually know more than the world knows. And we're going to talk about a verse a little bit later on that implies that, wow, that's... Actually, I think it's a verse that I put in here. Is that when you know more, you're responsible for more. When you know more, you're responsible for more. As believers, once we know something, God holds us to even a higher account. Did you know that when the nation of Israel started doing all their things against God, doing all of their during the times when they really were disobeying God, God says, you know, even the Philistines are looking at you and going, oh my, that's not right. And the Philistines were doing that. And the Philistines were not known to be healthy people in terms of relationships and everything else, in terms of sin. But God said even they were saying, ooh, they even know better, and they're still doing this. You know, they were noticing that this was something that was even worse than what things that they were doing. And partly it's because of what they were doing. But most people like to do things like that privately because it's not known, hoping that nobody will notice. Hoping that nobody will notice as you're taking a sledgehammer to the foundation of your marriage. And nobody will notice the big hole, the floor that's sinking, the doors that are not working right anymore. Nobody will notice that. One of the things that I'm going to get back to this Job 31:1, and actually it starts off where it starts. Sometimes you have to make sure you stop things before they start Job in 31:1 says, I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? So he already started off saying, you know what? I need to watch out. I need to be careful. I need to already say, you know what? I'm not going to use my eyes. We're going to come back to this idea of the eyes and kind of where things start. But I think things sometimes start because we do the wrong things in the place we're supposed to do them. And then I'm going to, as we get there, Galatians 5:19, and then when we go to Galatians 5:22, we're kind of two opposite ends. They talk about the works of the flesh and then the fruits of the Spirit. Now the fruits of the Spirit are pretty easy to see. You start off with a tree, it grows, it grows, it grows. In season, after it's done all of its growing, it produces fruit. So it's an end result of a long period of preparation, and it does all the chemical things inside. It comes out, okay, it's time to flower and fruit. So it takes time to do that, and it doesn't happen instantaneously. It's something that happens after a lot of work. Well, the idea, it says the acts of the sinful flesh, if we're to use that in correlating there, it also implies that these acts are not acts that are ones that just happen. Oh, I just happen to be happened to be kind of laying down, and my gosh, there was a woman next to me. Oh my gosh, our clothes were off. I don't know how this happened. It's actually a series of events that leads to this, that we as men need to be at the place where we need to make covenants with our eyes. So they talk about the acts of the flesh are obvious. The one I would start with here is sexual immorality, which is going to be the idea of, that's where we would talk about adultery would be one of those things. The idea is that we start at the end result of a journey towards more disobedient behavior to God. Is going to start to lead to these things. When you start having hatred, it didn't start at that moment. It started a bit before and led to an outward hatred. You had to actually feed it. These things like adultery actually need to be fed. We feed them. We want to feed them. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. All those things we want to do come from being part and being staying away from that, or staying towards God. Actually, it comes from staying towards God. You start to avoid the other things. I didn't finish up those verses because I didn't have enough room. I didn't want to put it all on there. Fire. Okay, now I got a question for Paul. You're a fireman.
Yes.
You are still kind of in that mind. Now, we're going to make an agreement with you that no matter what you say here, that I think we can try to say that if he says something that, we won't take him to court on it, we won't take him and do anything, we won't spread it around the church. But can you tell me, have you, and you're a person that has dealt with fires all your life, have you set a fire? And now, be careful with this. Have you?
Sure.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I can recount my thing. I'm going to tell everybody in the church now. Why is that not bad? If you're a person that's supposed to uphold the public trust.
Because it was for a specific purpose. It was for a campfire, lighting the stove, a wood stove, something like that.
Okay, so some fires are good, and some fires are not so good, right? You had to deal with, as a job, the not so good ones. For example, some fires are destructive, fires out of place, fires out of control. In the right place, but they've gone beyond what they should have been. Lust is one of those fires. And lust is a fire that actually needs to be fed. Lust doesn't happen in an instant. I mean, you can say, well, yeah, I thought that girl was attractive. Lust then is when now, after you thought that the girl was attractive, now you're saying, but she's really attractive. Oh my gosh, she's got, and wow, you know what? That would be so, and then all of a sudden these things go on in our mind. I've read about it, I've never experienced it. The idea is that those are fires that get out of control quickly, and they need to be dealt with. But there are other fires like selfishness. I deserve things. I deserve me. that gets way out of control, and it gets fed by ourselves, and we think that we deserve so many things, and we have to buy this and buy that, and I have to have a house this big, and I have to have these things for me, I have to have all of these tools. No, actually, I better not go there, because now I'm meddling with myself. But I gotta have, I need, it's all, and we get this idea of selfishness. In fact, this is the new me generation. I need to be happy. And it's a generation of I need. There's also the fire of self-loathing. That happens a lot. Satan loves to use that with us in our spiritual walk. You aren't really that good, could you? My gosh, you've done all of these things. You think these horrible thoughts. How can you be a believer? And you start going, oh yeah, I can't. But maybe I should go to God. Oh, you can't go to God. You're so filthy. No, you need to try to do things right. You start to do things on your own. It gets worse and worse. In fact, this leads many people into depression, self-loathing, and it becomes a spiraling thing that is fed over and worked over and over. We need to watch out for it. Anger and violence, those things that tend to build up. It's not that they happen instantly, though there are occasions that something happens, you hit your thumb. Actually, when you hit your thumb and then all of a sudden you start cursing and blah, 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 those things are already in there. Those things are just waiting to come out. And I think a lot of those, when you start, boom, blah, 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 and I've done that. I learned most of my foul language at 12. I knew every word, and I knew how to use it 3 times over. And I knew everything, and I used it all at that time with my friends. Then I became a Christian. And guess what? Those words are right at the tip of my finger. I hit my thumb, somebody stops in front of me too quickly. All of a sudden, these words that I normally actually try to emphasize to myself, don't use them. Stop using them. You shouldn't use them. They shouldn't be there. All of a sudden, they come out. And I go, my gosh, how long has it been since I've actually said, you know what, I'm going to swear today. I'm going to show people that I can, use all these words. I really try not to, and my gum, they're there. And I have to struggle against those words whenever something bad happens, because they're ready to come out. And I go, wow, why is that so? And I think a lot of it is because spiritually, maybe I'm not willing to give that area up quite as much as other areas. Anyway, so. Dad, then all of a sudden I go, what do you want? And I go, uh-oh. This wasn't a very secure environment for them. I kind of blew up on them. Do you create a hearth fire? A comfortable environment, low tension, welcoming. I mean, some of my son's friends love coming to our house because they know that it's going to be a safe environment. They're comfortable. They know that they can. They know that they don't have to do all these other things that they have to do before their friends, and they know that we won't tolerate it either. That when they come to our house, we create a warm, welcoming environment. That also means, do you go to your wife and say, hey, how are you doing? How's your day going? And truly mean it. Do you make it so it's friendly and warm for her? And is she doing it for you? And sometimes it only happens on one side, but you know what? Are we called to only do things when things are done to us? No. We are called to do things no matter if somebody reciprocates or not. We should be creating this whether the other side creates it or not. We might have children that are disruptive all the time. You need to still create that safe environment. Watch out for them. Do what you can. You can only do so much, but you need to continually do it. They need to know that, when finally they get into that trouble that they couldn't handle, they finally come to you, Dad, I really blew it. I mean, I know we've had a lot of arguments, but I blew it this time. Can I come to you? Or your daughter, Dad, I'm pregnant. Is that a warm place, a safe place, a place they can come and talk to you about those things? It's okay. Let's do the next right thing. Be there. Cooking fire. Do you bring spiritual food to the table? It's one thing to say to you, I bring the money and I bring the bacon in. Do you bring the lamb in? Do you bring the Lamb of God in? And that's that thing that's very, very hard to do is what I was reading today in this verse and talking with your kids and your wife. My wife and I'll do that sometimes. She's actually usually got these verses up, and we'll start talking about the ones because she does the daily, a specific daily reading plan. I don't always have such a specific one. I tend to start at one place and go to another. Start right here and go to this book, then I'll jump somewhere else. She has a daily one. She goes through 5 books at a time. I don't know what it is. And so, but we'll talk about the things that oh, did you know this? And we talked about this, and that is really a cool thing to do. And that's a cooking fire. Do you have a campfire? Do you create experiences together? Hopefully that are God-centered, not worldly-centered. Do you have a passion fire? That now with your wife, that's one kind of passion. And that is a separate, unique passion to your wife, but there's other passions to other people and service to others. That passion should be driven by self-sacrificing love. I need to provide, I need to give to you, and you should be the center. Now, when we're trying to work at these things and feed those fires, we're going to have a little bit less trouble with the, oh, I saw that girl down the, as she went by. Because we're going to already say, you know what, that's okay. I'm feeding my fire. I'm feeding my fire. And if we're working on these things, those things become less, they hit us less. It's not that they don't hit us. But if we're going home, we're saying, you know what, I feel no warmth here. I'm going to, and this woman over here, she's starting to give me some warmth. What do I do? And it's like, you gravitate. You know why there wasn't any warmth there? Partly? You. Me. That's why there wasn't the warmth there. Were we tending those fires to the place that I've actually said, you know what, I want to make it welcoming for my wife. And if I'm thinking that way for my wife, I'm going to be thinking less for other things. A lot of times we focus on, I don't sin. Don't commit adultery. Don't commit adultery. Don't look at that woman. Don't look at, don't look, peek, When we start trying to go against sin, that doesn't work. When we start going towards the right things, sin has less control over us. So that's with that. Okay, now when we're adulterous to God, I want to actually use this second verse as a way of showing how we're adulterous could be adulterous to our wives. First of all, Jeremiah 31:32, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, this is King James, although I was a husband to them, saith the Lord. And Isaiah 57:7, upon a lofty and high mountain hast thou set thy bed, even thither, I know it's King James, wentest thou up to offer sacrifice behind the doors. Also in the post have you set up your remembrance, for you have discovered yourself to another. Ooh, discovered yourself to another. And art gone up, and hast enlarged thy bed, and made thee a covenant with them. Thou lovest their bed, where thou sawest it. Now let me work backwards a little bit. I saw it. I started desiring it really heavily. And so then as I discovered that other, I then started to enlarge and started to increase my influence over that area. And then finally, I made a covenant with them. Wow. And that's how we are with God. It's not like with God that we instantly go away from God. Many times we start just kind of looking, well, that's really nice. I should spend more time at doing this thing. I really like this because it's really healthy for me. And then you start doing things that may be healthy for you, but you didn't find that balance, and all of a sudden it becomes enlarged and it starts taking over a territory that's God's territory. You start leaving God behind because you're so focused on this new love. It might be a love of health, a love of running, a love of some woman somewhere. It might be a lot of loves that start taking us away from God, and we then become adulterous. Are we faithful to God? We should be seeking God and asking, where are we going? Are we faithful to our wives? We should be seeking and asking God, where am I going? If we're not asking God where we're going with our wives, we're not probably going in the right direction, because where do we find truth? Do you guys know where we find truth?
God's Word, God.
What?
God's Word.
God's words? But actually even deeper than that. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The Word is God's expression of His desires to us. And there is a lot of truth there. But where is the ultimate truth where we need to be going to first? We go to God and said, reveal to me truth as I now search your Word, as I start praying to you, as I start also seeking guidance from men that I believe are men of God that would have godly. There's a lot of places, God can reveal truth in a lot of places if you're seeking Him first. So many people say, well, no, we just need to go to the Bible. The Bible will tell me everything to do. I just list them all. That is the Pharisees. They said, the Bible says this, do this, boom, 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 boom. They never went to God. It says, you never knew me. So where do we seek truth? We need to go to God. How do I know what to do in my marriage? How to tend my fires? How to do anything? We got to go to God first and ask. If we're not asking about where we should be serving for God, if we're not asking God, what should we be doing in our marriage? How can I make my marriage better? We need to be in that communication. That's one of our prayers that should be daily. God, how am I doing with my wife? What's going on here? What can I do better? Can you reveal it to me as I search your Word, as I search, as I pray to you? Will you bring something up to me? As I'm listening to sermons, can God at this time, can you reveal something to me so I can better serve my wife? I think that was it. So I put the questions back there, and there's a lot. The questions on the first side are a little. The first side's a little shorter. And I put all the verses down there, so that way you don't have to go look them all up. In the first side, it's talking about your covenant with your wife and your commitments in general. And on the second side, there's a lot of verses, and what I was trying to do with all of those verses is I was looking at, as a Christian, God is your master, your king, and your father. He's all three of those. He's your master, we're a servant. He's your king, we're his subjects. And he's the father, we're his children. All those areas, and what I tried to do is I said that all those areas demand obedience, but in general, you would probably say that a father really wants love, and that a king wants loyalty, and a master wants faithfulness. So I tried to find verses down there that actually expressed that, where God as a father would want love. God as a king wants obedience. Usually it's related to a nation because he's the God of our fathers, and whenever you talk about the fathers, that's always the nation that leads from him, or the group, so it's more of a national or a team thing. And then it talks about our as a slave and a master-servant relationship, faithfulness. And I found those scriptures that related to that. So I want you to know that that's scripturally based. And that's why there's all these verses related to it. So there's a lot of questions, so guys, take them as you want. You go, so this question's maybe too uncomfortable, let's avoid it. Or you might say, you know what, this is an uncomfortable question, let's actually look at it. Because some may be uncomfortable to you, and some may not. In fact, one of the places I mentioned, and I think I've said this before too, I say, what about if you have desires or thoughts about women and or men? Did you know there's a lot of men that have thoughts towards men? That doesn't happen to be my particular sin. My particular sin may be lusting after women. But there are some people, because of things that have happened in their life, or because of even the way that their DNA happened to go, they may have things of thoughts towards men, because maybe those were the only ones that did anything nice to them in their life. And so I want to make sure we understand that I'm not trying to be funny or facetious, but I think that there's a population within our churches that we neglect and say, you can't have these. In fact, you're worse than I am if you have those thoughts. The trouble is, they're no worse than me because I have bad thoughts too. If you're not lusting if your wife isn't your center of your thoughts of romance, I don't care what gender it is, it's wrong. So that's one of those things that we as men need to think about, and I just want to make sure you realize that. And I know it's one of those things in our churches we don't cover, just like we don't cover that, the idea they say that maybe those things might be genetic. They might, but anger could be genetic. Does that mean anger is right? Does that mean, so that if I have more of a proclivity to really being sexually attracted to people because of the way my hormones are, does that make it more right? Because I was born somewhere. No matter how we're born, we're still have to go by God's truth. We may struggle in one area more than an other, but we still are required to go with God's truth. And says God will not give us anything beyond what we can handle. So, okay, go to your groups. I'm not sure how the groups are going to work, so.
Just a couple announcements here. First of all, this Saturday, 13th, workday from 9 to 1 o'clock, or any part of that you can make it. And Rick Gasner's the point man on that. We'll meet in the foyer, and he'll direct us from there. The 25th of April, just a reminder again, which is a Thursday, we're going to meet a half an hour earlier, and we've got, that's our rib night, spare rib night. And I think that's it for now.
Okay.
If you haven't got a group, find one.